Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Greetings, everyone, wherever you are. Welcome to the International Webinar Ambassadors and Young Leaders Week 2020. I am Putri Ananda from PPI Jepang, who will accompany our great speakers and moderators as a master of ceremony during this event. The theme of this event will discuss Indonesia in global perspective, breakthrough against COVID-19, diplomacy and bilateral collaboration in dealing with global crisis. This event will take over an hour from 8 to 9 p.m. Western Indonesia Standard Time, which will be moderated by Overseas Indonesian Student Association Alliance Coordinator Mr. Fadlan Muzaki from PPI Tiongkok. As mentioned in the previous day, this event aims to stimulate a sense of awareness of the significance of international competitiveness, extensive networking, and global collaboration among Indonesian people. The ultimate goal is to overcome the present-day global crisis and seek for an opportunity to lead the world to study COVID-19 and its domino effects and pioneering Overseas Indonesian Student Association Alliance first international event, Ambassador and Young Leaders Week, as a stepping stone to emerge as an international organization. Furthermore, have been present with us today our great speaker. Please allow me to introduce him. Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Mahendra Siregar. Before we begin the event, I would like to inform you that in this event, we are also raising funds for COVID-19, especially for our medical team who are at the forefront in fighting COVID-19. Especially, thank you very much to all of you who have contributed to the donation. Immediately, I will pass this event to our moderator, Mr. Fadlan. The stage is yours.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening in Indonesian time, or good morning and good afternoon for the audience or for the people from another part of the world. Thank you for Master of Ceremony for the time. Ladies and gentlemen, all of the broad participants of this event, welcome to this seminar of Ambassador and Young Leader Week. With the special title for tonight, Overview of Indonesia Foreign Policy amidst COVID-19 pandemics and the shift in geopolitics and geoeconomics. And this topic will be discussed by our greatest speakers, Mr. Mahendra Siregar, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. But beforehand, let me introduce myself. My name is Fadlan Muzaki, and I will be serving as the moderator for tonight's topic. And first of all, I would like to thank to our greatest speakers in our event tonight and all of the audience. Thank you for joining this seminar. And before we start this presentation, I would like to give the information again, as mentioned by the Master of Ceremony. This event aims to stimulate the sense of awareness of significance of international competitiveness, extensive networking, and global collaboration among Indonesian people, especially in responding the COVID-19 and its domino effects in Indonesia at the global level. And then let me introduce our greatest speakers tonight by inform you his background and his experience. Mr. Mahendra Siregar was appointed as the Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia on the 25th of October 2019. Mr. Ambassador Siregar handed his letter of credential to the U.S. President as the 19th Indonesia ambassador to the country. He served as the executive director of the Council for Palm Oil Producing Countries. Prior, prior to that, he was a chairman of Investment Coordinating Board, vice minister of finance, vice minister of trade, chairman and CEO of Indonesia Exim Bank, and deputy coordinating minister for economic affairs. He was a member of board of commissioners of various corporations operating in financial service, mining, manufacturing, technology, consumer goods, and infrastructure. He graduated with a bachelor degree in economics from the University of Indonesia in 1986 and received a master in economics from Monash University, Australia in 1991. Today, he will talk more, as I told you before, um, focus more on overview Indonesia foreign policy amidst COVID-19 pandemic and the shift in geopolitics and geoeconomics. Before we begin, I would like to inform you again and again since morning or since last week that in this event we also raising funds for COVID-19, especially for our medical teams who are at the forefront in fighting COVID-19. If you want to donate, please refer to the bank account number or scan the QR code as shown below on your screen. So, Mr. Mahendra Sirgar, the time is yours.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Selamat malam dan tentu selamat pagi, selamat sore dimanapun berada. Mas Fadlan, it's my great pleasure to speak before you, the Overseas Indonesian Students Association Alliance, and I congratulate the organization for having this week-long webinar, and certainly it's very timely by choosing the right topic, very relevant discussion for you to observe further what's going on in the world, but also to have updated relevances of what the Indonesian government and of course people have been doing with regard to the current COVID-19 situation. And I also thank you and organization and for all the participants for having the fundraising to support our colleagues which are supporting or defending the Indonesians' capacity and ability to address and mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic situation. The topic given to me, I would like to divide that into two parts in the beginning, but then of course combine the two parts as one, I would say, presentation without getting into detail, because I look forward to having Q&A with the participants later on. The theme again is on the Indonesia's foreign policy amidst COVID-19 pandemic, and the second part is the shifts in geopolitics and geoeconomics. So there are two parts, but certainly interrelated. Let me start with the Indonesia's foreign policy amidst COVID-19 pandemic. When we began our journey during the early time of the pandemic situation, of course, our focus very much on the safety of Indonesian citizens wherever they are, and as a foreign ministry and through our diplomacy, we would like to, of course, protect the safety and the security of all Indonesians all over the world. And we have managed in doing so. And so far, we have been able to repatriate a couple of 100,000 Indonesians from all over the world. Let that be part of the voluntary repatriation, but also as part of the, I would say, the supported process of repatriation through government to government collaboration with many governments around the world where the Indonesian citizens are or were located, and through facilitating them in the returning of Indonesian citizens. Because you remember in the beginning of this situation, there was a big lockdown in many parts of the world, so it was not easy at all to get flights from many parts of the world back to Indonesia. So in many cases, we had to arrange chartered flight with governments and corporations that many of the Indonesians work at the time. So altogether, again, around a couple of 100,000 Indonesians have returned home. And the largest was from Malaysia. But the furthest would be from Peru, from Scandinavian countries, from South Africa, and many other parts of the world that we didn't know. The Indonesians have been so spread out all over the world. The second part is, of course, our diplomacy and foreign policy was very much dedicated and focused on improving and securing the access of Indonesia to many critical equipments and products, ranging from facial mask. In the beginning, it was very difficult to get access to the mask, but now it's better because we also produce many of the masks now. And then the PPD, the protective equipment, PPE, I mean, and then many of the medical drugs or medicines. And of course, also promoting our participation in the process of finding the vaccine. Let that be done through international and multilateral agency as well as bilateral. And we have been doing as far as possible to promote the collaborations at the, as I said, at the formal government to government or intergovernmental, but also facilitating the business to business from the investment side, from the trading side, and of course to promote Indonesia's interests. And so far now, while the process of finding the vaccine is still in progress, as I mentioned earlier briefly, we have been able now to produce the facial mask and PPE, and in fact we have already export some of them and mostly produce from the raw material to end products in Indonesia. Now we also start producing ventilators made in Indonesia, although we would like to accelerate the level of the production to get to the level that would be sufficient for Indonesia's own need. And also the PCR test equipment, we have also started producing it. But again, we are trying to accelerate and increase the capacity of producing it. So these are all the elements mostly, and there are many others, of course, but I would focus on this because the time constraint, that we ensure that the national interests and the people are very much served with the diplomacy that the Indonesian diplomats, of course, coordinated by the foreign ministry, but all over the world in 130 something embassies and consulate general offices and consulate offices. Now, while that happened, of course, we also see the shift. This is the second phrase of the theme, shift of the geopolitics and geoeconomics. And the shifts, uh, to a certain extent, was very much already preempted by the earlier uh, trend before the pandemic took place. We already saw some type of trade war between the US and China, and also geopolitical and geoeconomic competition between the two major powers. But also we saw skirmishes or limited, let's say, a dispute between countries, let that be about the border or about trade and economic related issues. And this pandemic situation accelerated that. So the shifts is more in the form of accelerating and escalating at the same time the trend that happened in the beginning to a much broader and higher level that we would never expect this to happen without the pandemic. So I think that's in a way the effect of the pandemic itself, accelerating and escalating the trend that happened, that become a shift, and even I would call it a disruption to the geoeconomic and geopolitical situation. Now, while that happened, as a result also with the lockdown or the partial restriction during the pandemic situation, we also see the global economic slowdown in the level that never happened before. The IMF just issued a report and a new outlook at the end of last week. And the title of that report say that crisis like no other, which means this is unprecedented crisis, and we have entered the uncharted territory, because globally in 2020 the economy would decrease by at least 5%, and some other organizations outside IMF even predict the reduction of the recession can be as severe as 6% or 7.5%. So this is a scale of recession or a slowdown that never happened before. The economy shrink from the earlier year. Now, with regard to Indonesia, we still hope that Indonesia is still able to enjoy positive growth of income or GDP this year, despite it would be very small, between 0 to 1%, but still a positive growth. And I think this is very significant, because if we can achieve that positive growth, it would mean that Indonesia is the only second country or the only other country with China that can enjoy positive growth for this year as member of the G20. So it's very significant. And I think we can do that because we already in the process or the transition toward the new normal, and we have started gradually reopen some of the sectors and the industries, and we have started seeing some activities on the economy. Of course, it's not yet or far from the earlier stage, but at least we have started seeing that. Now, it is very critical, while we want to also see the activities of the economy getting more active, but on the other hand, we also have to make sure that we can, in a way, mitigate, address, and control the risk of the pandemic not to be getting higher than which already are now. This is very critical because that would very much affect the confidence of the economic activities, but also of the people, which is more important to ensure that the economy, that the activities, that the social confidence would return to ensure that we can achieve a progress going forward. So we are impacted like all countries in the world, but the impact to us, relatively speaking, in terms of the economy, would not be as dear as other countries experiencing. And with regard to the pandemic itself, we have to improve continuously with regard to the especially elements of the uh, efforts in doing or addressing the pandemic. If we can classify, at least there are three aspects with regard to addressing the pandemic. First is, of course, to improve continuously the capacity of doing the test. And we have done that. And now we have the capacity to do 30,000 PCR tests every day. And that's quite significant from where we were just 3 months ago, which was just over 1,000. And the second one is to continuously sustain or even increase the capacity of the treatment. We are now seeing that the number of beds and services, health services, and treatment in our hospitals and our clinics have reached a much higher level and not overcrowded again or anymore like in the past. So it's good. The third one is on the tracing, and we keep improving our capacity on the tracing side. So with this improvement continuously and our self-discipline in ensuring the social distancing and the physical distancing when we do the activities like we do now, we do it through online and app-based rather than physical, which is necessary in this current situation. But also we have to wear facial mask and, of course, do all the hand washing and all other things that are required in our health protocol. So if we do that, then we can ensure that we are having things in check for the pandemic mitigation, but also give confidence on the economic side. Now, my last part of the discussion. During the slowdown and during the early part of the pandemic let's say spread out, we learned the hard way that it is important for countries not to rely on very narrow or very limited global value chain structure. Because we remember in even up to second week of March or third week of March, we could not get access to facial mask. We could not get access to PPE because despite Indonesia produce large number of facial masks and PPE, and export them, but we did not have the capacity to produce the raw materials for these products. And most of the, well, not most, all of the raw materials at the time were imported. So despite we have the capacity in producing and manufacturing to produce these products, but we could not do it because we did not have the access to the raw material because there was a lockdown in China. So they could not export the materials. And then when they could, they focus and prioritize their own need. So at that time, we had difficulty to get access. And then, of course, With that, it's not just a matter of export and import. It is also very much a strategic issue of health security. So by lesson learning from that experience, Indonesia and many other countries in the world would like to review and improve the global value chain so that Indonesia would be able to ensure that our value chain and production structure domestically would be sufficient to supply the critical need of the people. So we do not have to be reliant or unnecessarily risk our situation on such a possibility again in the future. And in addition to the facial mask and the PPE, we also realize that Indonesia still very much import 90% of our API, the active pharmaceutical ingredients, from outside sources. So while we have the capacity to produce medical drugs or medicines, but we don't produce that from the very upstream because we don't have the capacity to produce the raw material for this drug. So that is also another sensitivity. And we look around other industries as well, and we are committed to ensure that we would not repeat the same mistake. We should be able to improve our position in this global value chain and look at our interests and our risk management in a much better perspective. So we are promoting investment. We are promoting economic collaboration to ensure that we can get access with these products and critical end-to-end production structure. So that's also something that the foreign policy and diplomacy is focusing now and going forward. And we are committed, and lesson learning from the COVID-19 situation, we can approach this issue with effective steps, policies, and I would say network at the international level, so that we would be able to promote our national interests on this matter accordingly. So I better stop there, and I now welcome questions, if any, from all participants. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mahendra. It's so insightful. Like, I just get a broader knowledge of like what happens actually in Indonesia, especially from our vice minister's perspective regarding what we have talked and what is already discussed before. I would like to give like some reviews what the speakers already explained before. The first of all, Indonesian diplomats from more than 130 embassies and consulates throughout the world, they are doing a hard work for combating and helping Indonesian, both in their country, I mean, in many countries and also in Indonesia. For example, like doing open donation in many countries and helping Indonesian people in Indonesia itself. And then we are, as Indonesian, witnessing economics competition between US and China, such as trade war. And during this pandemic, it accelerate. This is the key word: accelerate and escalate higher level that we never expected before this pandemic. It is also mentioned before, Indonesia still able to enjoy a positive income. Even though this pandemic, Indonesia still enjoy the positive income, even though it is not significant. But compared to other countries, like this is still good news for us, because like we still get the profit and we still enjoy the positive income. Compared to other countries, we decline or get the minus for their incomes during this pandemic. And another important point that already mentioned by our speaker is regarding the raw material. This is the key. Because why? Because talking about the COVID-19, it is really related to the health product, the medical products. And it is the strategic issue for the international level because, like as it mentioned before, that Indonesia actually is able to produce the medical products, but actually some of the raw material is coming from China, and then um, during this because of that case, so we need to take the lesson that uh, we need to increase, or we need to improve global value chain so it can meet the demands for the domestic needs. So we don't need if it's happen, we don't need to rely too much on the other countries export. So we don't need, I mean, like we don't need to import too much the medical products from other countries. The first key point that I get from the speaker is the investment and economic collaboration to combat this pandemic. So we can collaborate and we can move, or we can act together to combat this pandemic. So now we would like to move to the question and answer session. Um, I think there is already some of questions here. This one. Let me read this one. It's from I can't read. This is from whom? But the question is, what are the challenges and the opportunities for young generation to make Indonesia become developed country, especially during this pandemic, because this pandemic will happen for maybe 2 years or 3 years. What competency that should young generation prepare for this one during this pandemic? So this is the question, Mr. Mahendra. So maybe we can like answer, and then I mean like giving the question and then answer, and if there is any other question, I will give you afterward.
Well, thank you for the question. The challenges and opportunities for the young generation in this condition is, I mean, of course, we are talking about Indonesian young generation, yeah, not everybody, but on the Indonesian young generation, this is what I would say. On one hand, this I agree with the uh, person that raised this question, that the pandemic itself would not be over in the short time, because it depends whether we can get the vaccine and whether we can get the vaccine soon or not. So presumably, uh, we would not get the access to the vaccine before next year, and that means the forecast or the outlook mentioned by the various organizations suggested that global economy would only return the soonest in the last quarter of next year to the level of before the pandemic. So that is already the time frame that is given for this global slowdown, and that even assumes there will not be any second wave or second hit. If we have that second wave globally, then we would not return before 2022. So it's even longer. Now, put that aside, because there's a big question mark when the vaccine will be, um, I would say, found and distributed. And of course, the cost, uh, I mean, human lives and miseries of the loss of the family members, of the friends and others are unimaginable and are, unquantifiable, obviously. And it's uncharted level and tragedy at the uh, global scale. Yeah. But with regard to the economic view, I would say that this shifts of the geopolitical and geoeconomic in particular, and the disruption itself produce opportunities that otherwise Indonesia would not be able to get access to. What I'm saying, again, I would like to use the lesson learned and the example of the facial mask and the PPE, the protective equipment. If we are not forced by the lockdown in other countries so that we had to produce ourselves the raw materials, and that could happen because of the pandemic and the lockdown policy, I think we would never have the possibility to produce the raw materials domestically. And we might never have the opportunity to produce an Indonesian-made surgical facial mask, as well as hospital, coverall or attire for surgery. So that is the lesson learned, which means if we are committed to do this and invest and develop our own capacity, we can do that. So that's the most important lesson learned. And I think that is also the most important opportunity for our young generation. So what we could not do because of the disruption, now we can have the opportunity to do it. So it goes back to your own expertise, to your own, if you are still studying now, of course, to the study that you are doing, so that we would be able to make use of your expertise, of your skills in the future. And whatever the expertise and the skills that you are doing, that you might in the past think it would not be possible that Indonesia make use of your expertise or skills. Now it is possible. So I think this is the biggest important lesson learned from this situation. Yeah. So please explore all the possibilities that you can see in your areas, whether you are in Indonesia or you are overseas. Look at the opportunities, and then you analyze yourself. This is something that Indonesia would need. And again, in the past, you would say, or we would say all that, well, we didn't need that. Well, it's something that we better just import from others. Well, we are not really need that because we need to specialize on something that are more doable for us. But now, I think it's a big lesson learned. When I mentioned about health equipments or medicines or vaccines, it's simply because we are in the issue of pandemic now. But it doesn't stop there. Look at our digital technology, our activities around the online, of the e-commerce, of the e-payment or digital payment, and then the online transportation. And then, of course, behind that, the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of small and medium enterprises supporting the supply of the groceries, of the food, of the you name it, or the haircut now, despite people use facial shields and masks and many other apparatus, but you would look them as more astronauts than hair salon or hairdresser. Yeah? But that happens in Indonesia. Now, let me give you one example. When I was the ambassador last year in Washington, D.C., I remember that at that time, Amazon, the big giant tech company, Amazon, was celebrating the launching of the one-day delivery service. So could you imagine that? We would think that a company as big as Amazon would travel and deliver things so fast. But I think it was in September 2019, they celebrated or launched the one-day delivery service. Well, I was shocked because I know that Indonesia has been enjoying this for some time. And here now, you young people would complain if the delivery of your orders are late by half an hour, let alone by one-day services. So things that we have been doing for many for some time. So there's no more surprises about that facility. But what we sometimes overlook is that behind that facility are innovation, our technology, our the capacity of the engineers, of the computer scientists, of the apps, and of course the people that deliver them, the motorbike entrepreneurs that deliver the last mile of the products, and of course the producers on the other end. So we have been doing it. And now, because of the COVID-19, we also accelerate and expand the capacity to new opportunities. Yeah. Now, the small and medium enterprises that didn't have access to financial services or banks, now they do not need banks or financial services in the conventional way. They can use the digital bank or financial services or e-payment to complete the whole transactions. But now, of course, we want to also have them get access to the financing, whether it's e-financing or digital based, or also conventional, but using e-transaction. So more people can get access to the benefit that we all enjoy. So these are all opportunities for young generation to explore and to exploit their capacity and their excitements and their interests in Indonesia. And when you are overseas, even to communicate and do the networking to promote the Indonesia's interests.
What we should do as the young people or young generation is focus on our expertise for the future. Don't forget to promote Indonesian interests everywhere we study, everywhere we stay at the moment. So it will increase the Indonesian bargaining in an international level. So we move to the another question that raised by Muhammad Ihsan. Your Excellency, regarding the role of global cooperation, what's the strategic plan to help Indonesia rise from the post-pandemic crisis? For example, disruption in economy, tourism, energy, and our aero sectors. Actually, this is the similar question that I get internal question when I opened WeChat, and I got the question from Alan, the student from Inner Mongolia. The question also similar, but Alan stated that we experienced the global economic crisis in 2008, and the crisis is getting worse here into 2020 because of pandemic. What can Indonesia take benefit, and how can Indonesia can take the opportunity from this pandemic? Because according to 2008 crisis, China take the opportunity to increase their economy. What else? What is the strategy and what is the opportunity for Indonesia during this pandemic? So I combined these two questions that's quite similar. So maybe our speaker can answer these two questions together.
Yeah, thank you. Let me put that into the proper context. In 2008, 2009, the crisis took place in the US and then Europe. The developing countries basically were not affected. China was not affected, or just a little bit affected. Indonesia as well. So this is the difference between that crisis and current crisis. Also, the crisis in the late 1990s. In the late 1990s, it was called the Asia Monetary Crisis. So it happened in Asia and affecting many developing countries in Asia, and not so much European and the US. And 2008, 2009 is the other way around. It happened to the US. We remember about the Lehman Brothers situation and case, but not very much affecting the developing countries, especially in Asia. But this time, it affects everybody, every country. That's why it's called crisis like no other. Never happened before like this. It affected China, it affected India, Indonesia, and all developing countries. But the level of the effect or the impact are varies. Some are dearly or heavily impacted. Some have more limited impact. And this is where I think Indonesia needs to ensure that the economic impact, although is severe, but not as much as impacted other countries. And we can even still see very strong resilience in the Indonesian economy, so that we don't have to go to a recession or a negative growth, they call it, of the GDP. So if we can make it still positive, although it's small, that would be an achievement. Now, how to do that? As I indicated, we already start reopening the economy. We have to ensure that we do not go back to the what we call the mass gathering restriction, or PSBB, because it really hit our economy dearly. But how to prevent us from going back to that situation is to ensure that we are disciplined as a community, as a country, as people, in exercising and implementing the health protocol, as I mentioned before, and many others have mentioned before, and you all know how to do it. So if we can combine the two, then we can enjoy the positive growth. And because of that, and because also, this is the second part of my answer to the question, we have large domestic market. So we have to ensure that this large domestic market also provide us with the instruments or the leverage to improve our global value chain position. Because now the export market basically are dropped to a lower level. The WTO, the World Trade Organization, forecast that the volume of international trade this year would decrease up to 30%. So while we have to face that situation, because no one can escape from that situation, we make use optimally the domestic market size for our own activities, and at the same time to improve our industrial and production structure. As I mentioned to you, if we should not just manufacturing things, that we really have to produce and make the whole added value processing as much as possible. and that happens to many industries. Yeah, I mentioned again and again some of the health and services as well as equipments, but of course in the other sectors and industries as well. Well, I understand with regard to tourism, it would take more time, especially if you think about the international tourism, because all countries are very worried that the imported cases could rise again and impacting the new outbreak at the local domestic respective country situation. So people would really restrict or limit the international tourism probably to a later stage. They would focus more on the essential business travelers. Now, again, Indonesia is a large population. We can promote domestic tourism, like what happened when there was the terrorist bomb attack in Bali in 2004. We didn't have any international tourists came at the time because they were scared to come to Indonesia and to Bali. But we, the people of Indonesia, that promote our own activities in tourism so that we can reactivating the tourism sector there. And if we can do that, and we can improve the resilience of the tourism sector, the hospitality sector, then if the international tourism return, we still have this sector relatively in place and in good condition. But if we do not promote ourselves, we do not invest in our own activities to promote domestic tourism in due course, maybe not now, when we have a better condition in the coming weeks, then we might not have any more tourism sector when the situation is open. So that is one. Happen also in the air traveling industry, which of course very much relying on the availability of the aircrafts. Yeah. So this is how I think we need to ensure that the situation today provide opportunities for us to improve our economic condition and global value chain position, but also our domestic market is critical to ensure that we can sustain and increase the resilience of all of our industries as much as possible, which smaller countries around the world not able to do so because they don't have the domestic market. Look at countries without any domestic flights. How can you sustain the airlines if there is no flight? Indonesia still have domestic flights, although international flights are still challenging. So we can manage in implementing strategy that can combine the size of the country and the diversity of the sectors between areas. Not all are affected, so we can quote unquote cross support or cross subsidize the sectors one with others. So that's my answer. On the energy, it's the same. It's still needed whether you are in the recession or not, but especially during the recovery. So it's not so much the issue of pandemic. Maybe it's more on the issue of better management of our energy supply and provision. Thank you.
Well, okay. It's so insightful, the answer from our speaker tonight. But unfortunately, the time flies so fast. So it's already 1 hour, so we need to end up with the conclusion of our discussion. So I would like to ask our speaker tonight to give the final conclusion. Also, please give the opinion, hopes, and also closing statement. And at the end, please close this event, the Ambassador and Young Leaders Week, Overseas Indonesian Students Association Alliance 2020, officially. So the time is yours.
Sure. I will be happy to do so. I will not make summary of my own earlier remarks, but I would like to close first of all by again expressing my appreciation to the organizations and to PPI Dunia, or the Overseas Indonesian Students Association Alliance, and this is a great activity to make use of the situation. And the wise men say that we should not just let a crisis go without anything positive or constructive coming out of that. So this crisis also gives new opportunities for us, and especially for young people. And you are part of the millennials. You are so familiar with disruptive technology, disruptive solutions. Now the world is being disrupted in the global scale. Yeah? So you can not only deal with it, you can be part of the great solutions of this disruption, because this disruption, as I said, give new opportunities for those who are able to have the right view and the strong commitment to provide the solutions. And your country, my country, Indonesia, provides that opportunity that probably others could not, because of the young demography. Our demography is very young, very talented, and very creative. That's why also we have so many great talents and world-class startup and digital companies. But at the same time, we also a large market. Please explore the opportunities. Nothing is off limit, because the disruption again provide the possibilities that you never dreamed before. So make sure that individually you continue working hard with your study, but at the same time you look at all the opportunities around the world, and then focusing on what you see as the opportunities during this situation. Don't look at this crisis as something that gives you frustration or despair. Yeah? No, it's not. It's something that would open and challenge you in the greatest way. So again, I thank the Alliance for this organization, and very much enjoy the discussion. And I hope you have achieved your result in organizing this week of ambassadors and young leaders meeting, and really make use of these opportunities to strengthen your network, your self-determination and confidence to embrace these opportunities that you would never have before, and probably would never have again in your lifetime. I officially close this event, and congratulate to all of you, and all the very best. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for our greatest speaker tonight, His Excellency Mr. Mahendra Siregar. Thank you very much for your time, your attendance. So this is a great opportunity to have insightful discussion with you during this event and end up with the conclusion and hopes. And thank you once again. I hope that I can invite you in another time in another meeting to give another insightful discussion to all of us for students who studied in more than 57 countries throughout the world. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm as a moderator, I'll give it this back to the master of ceremony. And thank you once again. Oh, okay. I got the chat from the committee that I should close this event because like I already opened and talked a little bit during the discussion, so it's really insightful. Thank you very much for the all attendance. I see on the YouTube chat box that there are a lot of greetings from our greatest speakers. Thank you once again for your attendance. Thank you for your attention tonight. And it's already closed officially, and I'm so proud of the all committees. Thank you once again for all of the speakers, all of the young leader, all of the ambassadors, and all of the participants and audience who already joined of our week-long discussion during this event. Once again, thank you very much, and I close this one. It's already closed officially by Mr. Mahendra, and I close this event as the closing for our all event. Thank you and goodbye. See you in the next event or in International Symposium of OISA 2020. Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.